people are no longer buying into this large-scale propaganda machine that has dominated so many people's minds, just corrupted their minds for years and years. But a lot of the world's not buying it anymore. Here are some photos of the massive protests that have taken place over the past few days. This first one is in Madrid. We're talking thousands and thousands of people supporting Palestine. This does not mean for me or for probably most of the people at these protests that they support every action of Hamas. You don't have to support every action of Hamas to be opposed to mass war crimes by one of the largest military that the world has ever seen. I want to bring you another image here. This one is, damn it. This one is Amsterdam. Amsterdam protest, again, thousands and thousands of people supporting Palestine. There were giant protests in Washington, D.C. and New York City and other cities within the United States as well. And most of these were not brought to you by your mainstream media, although it looks like this clip I'm about to show you is some mainstream media, but many of them were ignored, or the mainstream media like CNN does a, brief 30-second thing on them because they're supporting Palestine, and that's not really what our mainstream media is in the business of doing. So here is thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people in London in the past couple of days supporting Palestine. Large protests really everywhere in so many large cities supporting Palestine, opposed to the war crimes being perpetrated by Israel, opposed to an open-air prison in Gaza, opposed to 2.2 million people having their water and electricity and medicines and everything else shut off, food shut off into the area, which is also a war crime that is causing mass harm to civilians, which is not legal. I'll be getting into more of that, not legal under international law, but I'll be getting into more of that. I'll be getting into how Israel is reshaping international law as we speak, what they're attempting to do in many ways. And I will also get into debunking the human shields garbage. This is in France, in Paris, where they've even banned protests in support of Palestine. But this one obviously got through. This one snuck through the cracks. Tens of thousands of people in Paris, France, despite the ban on protests that support Palestine, which of course is hilarious in a country that claims to have some degree of freedom of speech. I realize they might not claim it as much as the United States does. But here is the French response to some of these protests. I don't know. I think the one I just showed you was after this, so I don't think this was the response to that protest. But here was the French response to some of these protests a few days ago to bring out the water cannons and tear gas. Sorry, here it is. To bring out the water cannons and tear gas on protesters, peaceful protesters, unarmed peaceful protesters supporting Palestine, supporting the Palestinians that are under siege, supporting the standing up against war crimes, supporting international law. And for doing that, these people have been hit with water cannons and tear gas. Tear gas, of course, a chemical weapon, which is illegal under the Geneva Conventions unless you use it on your own people. As long as you're, which is, it's nice to see. I'm glad they made that exception. If you feel like using the chemical weapons on your own people, then go to town. Have some fun with that one, okay? But just don't use it on other countries. But if you want to use chemical weapons on your own people, that is perfectly fine by us. This is a massive march in solidarity with Palestine in Dublin. Thank you, Alan McLeod, for putting all this together. Again, footage of the giant protests that are in support of Palestinians, in support of ending the apartheid state. If it matters to those of you who might not know my stuff, who might be stumbling ass backwards into my live streams for the first time, if it matters to you, I am Jewish, Jewish by birth, atheist by choice, but that shouldn't really matter. You can be Jewish and not support an apartheid state and not support war crimes. And I'm going to be bringing to you over the course of this hour many other groups that are opposed to war crimes. Here is police in Berlin beating up protesters for supporting Palestine. It's illegal in Germany to support Palestine, I believe, as well as France. And of course, these protests, these peaceful protests in support of Palestine, are also, like I just said, in support of actually respecting international law, actually abiding by international law, actually not committing war crimes. That's also what these are in support of, these protests, these marches, these peaceful marches. And so when police, really fascists, beat up those who want nations to stick by international law, that makes them fascist. That makes them the arm of a fascist state that will not let you speak up and say we should abide by the international laws against war crimes. Thank you, Claude, for the donation. Claude says, hi from Quebec. Sorry we got Trudeau. You're a great reporter. Thanks again, Claude. I appreciate that. Let's see what else my friend Alan has for us. Here is Stockholm, which I was there not long ago. And I never saw a protest this large. I went to some Assange protests, free Assange protests that unfortunately were quite small there, but this obviously much larger in support of Palestine. That's good to see in Stockholm. This square, which I've been to that square, it's quite large. So this is a significant number of people, and it doesn't look like it ends at the square either. It seems to go beyond it. So that seems like a large number of people. And Sweden is known for kind of bowing down and agreeing with anything the United States does. Big fans of the U.S. there. Big, love the U.S. So to see even this many people in Sweden standing up for Palestine is great to see. Here's Glasgow. Massive numbers there as well in Glasgow, Scotland. And, for those of you listening to the podcast, this show is also a podcast for those of you who prefer that. It's called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. It's called Moment of Clarity on other platforms. For those of you listening to the podcast, when I say, I'm playing a clip of a massive crowd in fill-in city, Dublin, Paris, whatever, just picture a lot of people. That's how you can that's all you got to do. Just when I say that, even though you can't see the video, just know that when I say a lot of people, just picture the peoples. All right. So now that you've got your imagination going on there, here's Copenhagen. Very long march there. And Don't worry, podcast fans. I'm moving on here in a second. Not this entire show is not just look at this many people, look at this many people. But the reason I thought it was important to bring you all of these large groups is because this is the opposite of mainly what the mainstream media shows. And again, I'm not saying that mainstream media did nothing on this. There may have been a little footage here or there, but they are heavily in favor of the U.S. Western propaganda that acts like, oh, Israel is just so they're the downtrodden, they're the beaten down, despite the fact that Israel has had this apartheid state and this open air prison in Gaza and the imprisoned people in the West Bank and has had it going for a long time now, has had the persecution of Palestinians for decades.